Hello, I'm Chatty and welcome to my video. So I got some new paper and this is my first kind of experiment with it. But you'll see here that I put down some quite wet ink and it just keeps on bleeding and bleeding further. Within these first couple of strokes I realised that I was going to have to reassess how I was using this paper because my usual technique of putting down quite a watery wash was just not going to work. I've been listening to a podcast called How to Fail by Sarah Day on Spotify, and it's very inspirational to hear all these very successful people, how not everything went to plan. And I think that's something to remember with when being creative and being artistic, is that not all the paintings you do will go to plan. You might try a new material and you have an idea that, it will look a certain way, and then when you try and do it, the reality is that it doesn't, and that's okay. With this painting, I still have that same original concept. I could try doing it on some different paper. Here I'm trying to think of ways that I can use this paper with this kind of sketch I've got going here in a way that would not bleed as much, so I've started using some thicker ink you can see on the tail. And it's basically about reevaluating where you are, where you can go from there, and what I've learned. So with this painting I've learned that I can't use anything wet. The thicker ink, the less dilute ink is sitting nicely on the paper. It's not terribly pleasant for me to paint on, however I'm still getting that kind of final effect that I'm after. One of the things I mentioned in one of my previous videos is how when you start creating art again it can be very daunting because the pieces of work you're creating, because you're out of practice or you haven't had enough practice, aren't up to the standard of your own taste, and that can be quite demoralising because you spent time and you spent effort working on pieces that you don't like. But if you never make those pieces that you don't like, you're never going to make pieces that you do like. So with this paper, that turns out I don't like this paper for its original purpose, which was to do ink paintings. I've learned that I can use it for lino prints because the ink is a lot thicker and it doesn't bleed as much. And if I never bought this paper, then I wouldn't have learned that, and I wouldn't have been that step further along that line of learning what does work for me and what doesn't. Here I'm just using some Posca pens. This is another art material I've bought recently, which I'd seen a lot of people using on Instagram, and I was like, yes, it looks brilliant. And actually I'm not that crazy about them. I enjoy working with a paintbrush and ink or with lino, and so these Posca pens actually work quite well on this paper because they're not as wet. But in my work in general, I don't enjoy the process, the feel of the pen, the paper, as much as I enjoy feeling a paintbrush on the paper. And I would never have found that out if I hadn't taken that leap and bought some Posca pens. And it isn't just about buying art materials, it's also about trying a different style or drawing a different subject that you've never drawn before. You just need to go out and draw it. This piece in the end did turn out quite cute. Here I'm just going in with the pen and adding these little accent details, which I think just really add to the kind of texture of the bird. It isn't what I planned for this drawing at all, but it was quite an enjoyable process. I think sometimes it can be tempting to just bin a piece if it goes a bit off the rails. I think it's sometimes worth carrying on, experimenting a bit with what you can do. Of course, you can always bin a piece because it is your own artwork and your own art practice. I think it's also important not to put that pressure on yourself to always be producing good pieces of art. It's okay to produce bad art because you learn through that. So be kind to yourself and keep creating stuff that you enjoy. That doesn't mean that you're creating stuff that is perfect finished pieces. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.